And now the hallowed MCG is set to host Shane Warne's state funeral. Nine Sports presenter Tony Jones joins us now from the MCG. TJ, good morning to you. It seems like a fitting location for the King of Spin's farewell. I still can't believe it.
Well, even as you say that, Karl, good morning, you know, the King of Spin's farewell, it is still hard to sort of process, isn't it? And here we are. And I guess in some ways the shock has now subsided, and everyone, whether it be his family, of course, and we can't even imagine the untold grief that the family's going through at the moment, but also his former teammates. He had such a large network of friends, and it is quite heartening in many ways to hear some of the stories. And even on social media, I noticed on the news last night, one lady wrote that she was in a 7-Eleven store and Warne was in there, and she got a selfie and he signed her Women's Weekly for him. So just things like that meant very little to Shane Warne, but meant so much to other people. And that's why, getting back to your original statement there, Karl, about this being a fitting place for his state funeral, I could think of no greater place for it other than the MCG. And the only concern is whether there's going to be enough seats here. Yeah,
I agree with that. I think it'll be massive. It'll spill out and everyone will watch it. I mean, this guy meant a lot to... I mean, even just talking this morning to Jo in makeup, and she said her and her husband pursued Warne through Crown in Melbourne to try and get a photo with him. I mean, he was that kind of guy, and he was out the front, you know, trying to get away from them, and he was having a bunger at the same time. And I mean, he did just affect so many people in different ways.
Well, I think the thing, Karl, is that, you know, and we quite often in this job pay tribute to people who have passed on, people who have spent much of their life in the public eye, and they're portrayed, for the most part, quite rightly, but they're portrayed as superheroes and never put a foot wrong or anything like that. But in the case of Shane Warne, you can genuinely say that there weren't, and I haven't come across anyone in the past 48 hours or so who said, oh, yeah, but I remember once he sort of dragged me over the coals. I mean, he genuinely went out of his way to actually get a selfie or just to help somebody. I mean, the amount of people that have come here over the past couple of days and sort of whipped out their phone and shown the selfies with Shane Warne and the like. He was a very, very giving person of his time. And to actually see him in England, where you could argue that he was actually bigger over there than he was here in Australia, which sounds bizarre to say that, but he was like sporting royalty in England, and you know that from the tributes that have been coming out. But to see him at grounds like Lord's or Edgbaston or anywhere else where he was commentating, the way the fans fawned over him was quite remarkable, and he never shied away from that. I know you were joking before when you were talking about, you know, he was running, you know, away from Jo and the like at Crown. I mean, he was happy. I mean, if that meant that he spent an extra 20 minutes in the car park, so be it. So we were very, very lucky to have had someone like Shane Warne in our lifetime, and to see that type of behaviour at first hand, because it really does reinforce just the way we idolise these people, and sometimes it's in the right manner.
I was grateful to know him, and he made he just being in his presence was a lovely thing. He's always very quick. He's quick-witted. He's very honest and an incredibly loyal fellow. He was so loyal and so good to be around. Look, is there any idea on when? I know it's said to be early planning, but on when this might take place, TJ?
Well, no, we don't know yet. I mean, obviously the main priority for the family at the moment is getting him back here. I mean, with the autopsy done, you would think that would be in a matter of days now, and then it will be time to actually work. It's a very, I mean, the state funerals by their very nature are very, very difficult to actually stage, if I can use that word. I mean, because there will obviously be the Prime Minister here. There will be John Howard, for example, would want to be here. So, you know, everything's got to match up. And also with the AFL season starting, and I know that sort of sounds like an afterthought, but that's got to be taken into account, because this stadium will be used next Wednesday, Thursday, and then across the weekend. So there's also that to consider. So it is going to be a logistical nightmare. But I can tell you one thing, such was the standing of Shane Warne, they will make it happen. And they will make it happen to make it as less taxing in a emotional sense on the family as they possibly can.
Very good, mate. Your tributes have been wonderful. TJ, thank you. Welcome back to the show. Shane Warne's shattered family is desperately trying to speed up the return of his body to Australia after his shock death in Thailand.
It comes as tributes continue to pour in from around the world. Let's bring in Sydney Morning Herald Southeast Asia correspondent Chris Barrett, who's in Thailand. Chris, good morning. Shane's body has been transported to the Thai mainland for an autopsy. It happened overnight. Have we got a result yet?
No. Good morning, guys. Yeah, there's no result yet. It, as you say, it was transported by ferry and then by a police convoy in an ambulance yesterday, and the autopsy was taking place at a hospital almost immediately afterwards. Expect to find out some sort of development on that front today. There may not be a result for some time, but it has been indicated that the body would be released after the autopsy took place. So hopefully, in that sense, the process of it returning to Australia will be able to be sped up a bit.
Do we know yet just how likely or how long it's likely to take the results to come through?
Yeah, Karl, not particularly. I mean, it can take sort of as long as a month or so for full results to be available. But yeah, as I said, that won't sort of precluded the process of repatriation. That's really been negotiated in the last couple of days by the Australian government. They've been pretty involved with quite a number of staff, including the ambassador down at Koh Samui and also at Surat Thani, which is where we are now, the provincial capital just across the water on the mainland. So, look, there's going to be issues with customs, I guess, and all those other sort of procedural issues that take place when these sort of things happen. But I think it's probably safe to say that that'll be reasonably fast-tracked in this case.
And it is still a shock that really the world's still coming to terms with. Chris, do we know any more about these reports that he'd seen a doctor in relation to a heart issue?
Yeah, well, that came from the police. That friends had told him. So the friends had told police that when they went to the police station at the weekend, just to give some more information about Shane Warne's situation and the lead up to his death. And I note that his manager said something along the similar lines, and that he had been experiencing some chest discomfort lately. So, look, I guess look, in hindsight now, that may not be that surprising, but so we don't really know anything more about it in that sense. But he's another of his friends, one of his friends who was here wrote a tribute article last night, and he said he hadn't actually had heard that about Shane Warne having those sort of problems.
Okay, lots of tributes coming in, huh?
Yeah, absolutely, and and including over here as well. There's a reasonable expat community, obviously in Thailand and also on Koh Samui, and that shot there you're just showing. There was some people turning up yesterday when we were there, dropping off flowers, beer bottles, flags, just paying their respects. It wasn't enormous news in Thailand. Originally when I stepped off the plane, my taxi driver didn't know what I was talking about, but they've certainly picked up the gravity of it as a result. They've realised that what a loved and famous character he was in Australia and in many other places around the world, and it's quite big news. In the days since then.
All right, Chris, thank you so much for your time this morning. I know it's bright and early there in Thailand. Thank you for the info. Welcome back. It'll be a fitting tribute to the King of Spin. Shane Warne will have a state funeral in Victoria, with the MCG being offered as the venue. Just imagine 100,000 Warnie fans at the G all saying goodbye to their hero. You can imagine it. Shadow Treasurer Jim Chalmers is in Brizzy for us this morning, and here in the studio, Triple M's Gus Wallen. Good morning, guys. Nice to see you both. To you, first of all, Gus, I mean, you knew Warnie, and like me, his absence will create a huge vacuum. I just couldn't believe it.
I still can't believe it. I'm still expecting something to come and say it was all a big joke.
Yeah.
A very sad one, of course, and a cruel one. But Yeah, I was only with him through the Ashes, just larger than life through the press box. Just everyone loves him. Going out to have a bunger, you know, not allowed to actually do that inside a ground, but security guards wink, wink, nudge, nudge, and give him a little fire area just to sort of have a bunger and have a chat. He'd walk around without his shoes on because the shoe would be used to block the door, you know, closing in on him, and everyone would just look at him and say good day, and he'd say good day. There must have been 1 million photographs I've seen over the last couple of days of single people with Warne, because he never said no to a photo, and he'd not just take the photo, he'd stop and have a chat as well.
He also likes single people.
He did. He did. There's no doubt. There's no doubt. He's upstairs, but he probably would have had to spend a couple of days in the sin bin before he gets.
No, he'll be on whatever the equivalent of Tinder is up there. Warne will be going nuts. Look, it's Jim. He affected a lot of walks of life, didn't he? And I reckon almost everyone's got a story about Warne.
Yeah, nobody like him before or since, and that's why, you know, having led this big Australian life, he deserves a big Australian send-off. So I think it's really terrific, frankly, that the governments have been speaking to the Warne family about a big send-off. Big state funeral at the MCG seems entirely appropriate to me, and renaming the Great Southern Stand after the great man as well. That seems like a good way to pay tribute. I envy your friendship with him, Gus. I wish I got time to knock around with him. I saw him play a couple of times live at the Gabba, but I didn't cross paths with him, and I think, like a lot of Australians, you know, wish he did. He sounds like the best company, obviously a remarkable cricketer, but much more than that, a cultural icon.
Whenever I was at Crown in Melbourne, he'd always give me a call if he was staying there, because he'd be playing poker or whatever. He'd come down in like a tight Adidas red tracksuit with 3 bungers in his mouth and a can of Red Bull, and then just tell you the most magnificent stories about, you know, what was going on in his life. And he'd put shocking 80s music on and dance around, and you know, he's one of those great fellas.
Some of the great nights was the third night of the Boxing Day Test match. You'd always have a party at his house.
Yeah.
And you'd turn up at his place and you never know who you're going to bump into, but it was always great company, always good booze, always good tucker, and it was just fantastic. And I'm remembering those moments now.
I got such amazing loyalty from him. Yeah, he's a very loyal man.